Hi, I'm Jonathan Eder. Welcome to the piano lesson. Today I'd like to talk about jazz chord voicings, and particularly I'd like to talk about rootless voicings, what we call rootless voicings. And these types of piano voicings are critical to being a jazz pianist, and they're also quite interesting and quite beautiful. They can be a little tricky in the beginning, but once you get a hang of them, I think you'll really love them. So let's go back and take a look at some of the basic chord patterns that a jazz pianist would play. The 2-5-1, we've talked about this in other lessons. In the key of C, 2, D minor 7, 5, G7, and 1, C major 7. So again, 2, 5, 1. And what we ordinarily do as jazz pianists is we're not limited just to playing 7 chords. We can also extend the chord, they're called extensions, and we can play beyond the octave. So the first extension after the 7th would be the 9th. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And in this case, the 9th in the D chord is E. D is the root, F is the 3rd, A is the 5th, C is the 7th, and E is the 9th. Actually, if we're getting really picky, we'd say D is the root, F is a flatted 3rd, simply because relative to the key of D major, and we usually are speaking relative to a major key, in the key of D major, there's no F, there's F sharp, so we consider it a flatted 3rd, 5th, and a flatted 7th, again because in the key of D, there's no C natural, it's C sharp in a D major scale. So we consider that a flatted 7th, and then the 9th. The 9th is the same note as the 2nd, but it's a wider interval, and it creates some colors. And in music, color means dissonance. So there's our sound, D minor 9. Now, there's several ways to approach playing a chord like this because it's really too big to play in one hand ordinarily. So what you could do is you could take the bass note, bring it down an octave, and play the chord in the right hand, the upper part of the chord, 3rd, 5th, 7th, and 9th, and the bass in the left hand. You could, of course, go up an octave higher, and that doesn't sound too bad. Of course, the quality of the chord changes. If I went back down to play the low bass note, you could still hear the difference in the sound. So sometimes it depends on where you play the chord on the piano as well as what chord you're playing. Now, the 5 chord is very interesting. We only need to move one note, and that's going to be in the right hand. We're going to move the middle finger down to B. The bass note is going to go up to G. So we're going from D minor 9 to G 13. So the bass moves up a 4th, and the right hand, what was formerly the 3rd of the chord, now becomes the 7th of the G chord. A is the 9th of the G chord, B is the 3rd, and G now is the 13, what was formerly the 9th in the D minor 7 chord, D minor 9, now becomes the 13. I'll play that again. D minor 9, G13 with an added 9th. Pretty typical chord combination. And then down a 5th in the bass to C, right hand changes. Here we have C major 9, E, G, B, and D. So I'll play that again. 2-5-1, D minor 7 with an added 9th, G7 with an added 9th and a 13th, C major 7 with an added 9th. Again, there's our G13 chord. The 7th of the chord, actually, again, a flatted 7th because there's no F in the key of G, it's F sharp. A, B, which is the 3rd, A is the 9th, or the 2nd, but which, in this instance, it's the 9th. And then E, which is the 13, it's the same note as the 6, but again, we're considerably wider interval. That would be a 6, that would be a 13. C major 9, root, 3rd, 5th, 7th, and a added 9th. Now, these are called rootless voicings simply because very often I use them in the context of playing in a band. So the bass player is going to be playing the root. I, however, will be playing the chord in the left hand and the melody in the right hand. And what I'll do is I'll play the top part of the chord, and then I might play a melody, or perhaps I might be improvising. I might outline the chord, for instance. Just by looking at this chord resembles an F major 7 chord just by itself, out of context. And that's one way to remember it. But when I add the D, suddenly it becomes the D minor 9 chord. The G chord is rather an abstraction because, again, there's no G in the chord, is there? I mean, we really need the G in the bass to make it sound completely like a G. But when I see G7 as a jazz pianist, I'm playing something like this. That's typically what I'm doing. I'm not doing a G7 root position chord. And that can be a little tricky in the beginning, but it's a very typical voicing for a jazz pianist. And then I might play, let's say, I might play the triad in the right hand, the triad G, B, D. I might play it in first inversion. It's a very typical way to play chords on the piano as a jazz pianist. And then C major 9, well, C major 9 without the bass note resembles E minor 7, E, G, B, D. That's a way to remember it as well. So the bass player, of course, playing the C in the bass, so you have that sound. But so what you might have is, so I'm just playing the exact same notes in the right hand that I'm playing in the left hand. Here I'm playing a block chord, here I'm playing a broken chord. I might even decide to arpeggiate the chord. So that's a possibility. Now, there's another way to play this rootless voicing, and it has an element of an inversion in it. An inversion, again, being when we're taking the chord notes and we are rearranging the notes. So typically, if you have a D minor triad, let's say, and there's 3 notes in the chord, there's 3 different ways you can play the chord: D, F, A, F, A, D, or A, D, F. This would be root position, first inversion, and second inversion. We're going to do something similar. It's an inversion of a sort. I say of a sort because, again, we're not really using the root in the chord. But what we had is D minor 9, and the right hand I have F, A, C, E. I'm going to take these bottom 2 notes, F and A, I'm going to bring them up an octave and play those in the right hand. It's the same chord, but I call this is a closed position of a sort, and this is an open position. But basically the same notes. And if you play the D, very similar, not exactly the same, it has a different quality. To get to the G13 chord, all I have to do is move my thumb from C to B. And that's our G13. Before I did this, here's our G13 chord. And what's happened is I've taken these notes, F and A, and they're up here now. And I've gone from the C to the B. And that's how we got our G13. So, and then C major 9, here's our root in the bass, 7th, 9th, 3rd, and 5th. I'll do that again. 2, 5, 1. So, very typical way for a jazz pianist to comp. So comp, sort of an abbreviation for the word accompanying, right? But we're playing chords on the piano, much in the same way a guitar player might play. There's a rhythmic element to it, much in the same way that a drummer would add a rhythmic element on the snare drum. So we might have. Notice I'm playing both voicings now. I'm playing the open voicing in the left hand and the closed voicing in the right hand, and then the bass player might be playing the bass. You could combine both of them, right? Or you could just play the root in the right hand. You could also add a Latin American music element to it. whereby maybe you're playing. So you can stylize these voicings as well. Now, how would you apply them to repertoire? How would you apply them to a song? Well, earlier we had done Satin Doll. And Satin Doll, so that's 2-5, D minor 7, G7, then, well, I could use the close position voicing in the right hand and the bass and a bass note. So rather than doing this, I could play the chord in the right hand. The melody, usually we want to keep the melody note as the top note. Now, on the piano, we can very often play clusters of notes or seconds in the melody, and it'll sound acceptable. Sometimes it even sounds good. In other situations, it might not. If you have brass ensembles or string ensembles, it might be more problematic. But on the piano, it actually works rather well. So you have. So there's an application of using some of those close position voicings as part of our arrangement. We also did How High the Moon. So How High the Moon, before we were doing you might decide to use a close position voicing as you're playing. So these voicings, if I add the bass note, G major 7 with an added ninth, G minor 9, C13, F major 9, 2, 5, 1, 2, 5, 1. We're getting a bit low on the piano here for this type of close position voicing. An open position voicing would probably be more appropriate. So I would take these two notes, D and F, and I'd bring them up here. And rather than doing, what I did before, G minor 9, B13, I would play them in open position. I think it's a little nicer playing in that register in the piano. Otherwise, it sounds a bit too muddy. So again, you have to work with these chords a bit. You have to take into consideration where you're playing on the piano, what register are you playing. You're playing in the tenor range or more in the alto range. You may have to adjust the melody. The melody may have to go an octave higher. But what you should do is create an exercise so that you go through all of these in all 12 keys. So 2, 5, 1, 2, 5, 1, 2, 5, 1, 2, 5, 1, 2, 5, 1, 2, 5, 1. And we're back to the key of C. So we went through the key of C, B flat, A flat, G flat or F sharp, E, D, and then C. That was with the open position. And then the closed position. Now down here, a little muddy. We might not want to play that low. We probably would want to play higher with those kinds of voicings. Sounds a little nicer. So you could also, again, once you're done with those 6 keys, you go up or down a half step, and you do the exercise again. So we could start, we started as a 2-5-1 in the key of C. We could go up a half step and do a 2-5-1 in the key of D flat, let's say. So open position. And then close position. Getting a little muddy. I wouldn't want to play that low on the piano in that register again. So maybe either starting higher or jumping up a bit, but having D minor 9, excuse me, F minor 9, B flat 13, E flat major 9. Those are much more useful in that register. And if you, as a pianist, if you can do something in the right hand, you should be able to do it in the left hand. So you practice the chords in the right hand, bass note in the left hand, then you reverse it. Chord in the left hand, and possibly something else in the right hand. You could take any of these chords again. E flat minor 9, take it in the right hand, play a block chord in the left hand, and a broken chord in the right hand. I made one slight modification to that chord. So this is D flat major 7 with an added ninth, and here we have a 13. I raised the 5th up, so that was a slight modification from our original exercise. Our original exercise was, and that's probably what you should stick with, but just be aware that all of these can be modified ever so slightly. Right now we're talking about extensions, and again, an extension in a chord is a 9th, an 11th, or 13th. Usually we're limiting ourselves to 9ths and 13ths. 11ths can be used as well. They're a bit more, you have to use them a bit more judiciously and more carefully because they have a special sound to them. And then you can also do what are called alterations. So an alteration is when you raise or lower one of those a half step, and that's another slight modification that you can do. Here's D minor 9, here's D minor 7 flat 5 with an added ninth, so slight modification, or 2-5, G13, and there's a flat 9. What was formerly the flatted 5 now becomes the flatted 9th. Sometimes we do that to add an internal voice, to add some type of internal counterpoint. So there you have it. I hope that this was helpful for you folks, and if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. Again, I'm Jonathan Eder. This is the piano lesson, and I look forward to hearing from you.